First of all, thank you again, Lilia and Sheikh Abdullah, for the perfect introduction to a four-way conversation on the meaning and the promise of expanded, normalized relations between Arab states and Israel. And I also wanted to, again, thank Ambassador Al-Rawai for joining us virtually while you're isolated because of COVID. So, it is an honor for me to share a stage before a global audience with ambassadors of 3 Arab states and Israel, a configuration that was really unimaginable just 2 years ago. These countries, their leaders, their distinguished representatives before the United Nations are making history. They're truly making a new Middle East. AJC is proud to have contributed to this history and to keep contributing to a widening of the circle of Arab-Israeli peace through our new office in Abu Dhabi and AJC Project Interchange, which you just heard described a moment ago, the work of our extremely well-connected Jerusalem office, and a range of exciting new initiatives and programming partnerships. Now we have a very limited window and a lot of ground to cover, so let me pose the ambassadors a few basic questions and ask for condensed answers. I know it's always a challenge for us. First, ambassadors, and I'll start with you, Ambassador Nusseibeh. I have a 2-part question, in 3 minutes, of course. Please tell me how your country has adapted to this historic change, specifically how the general public and the business community and, very significantly, your young people have responded to normalization. And second, what are the particular benefits that your country is expecting from normalization? Are the primary benefits in the security dimension, increased trade and investment, the sharing of technologies, water resource management, health, energy sector, another realm? What are the benefits that you're seeing? Thank you.
Thank you, Jason, for having us, myself and my colleagues here today. And I'll try and overturn the stereotype that ambassadors to the United Nations cannot give condensed answers. So first of all, I have to start on behalf of all my colleagues in thanking David Harris for his incredible work and his contribution and the legacy he leaves behind. We look forward to working with Representative Deutsch and, of course, with Ambassador Sievers, who has just opened the first of its kind AJC office in Abu Dhabi, and we're proud to be here to announce that too. Jason, to answer your question as briefly as I can, I think the Abraham Accords have clearly been a step change for the region, a step change in the way we think and how we address problems in the region, but also particularly for the UAE, the country that I represent, an amazing dynamism and productivity and diplomacy has emerged as a result of those accords that were signed. In the people-to-people exchanges, in the business, in the community ties, $2.5 billion or thereabouts in trade already, and that's before the free trade agreement that was just signed between the UAE and Israel, where we predict and hope that in the next 5 years we'll see over $10 billion in trade annually. Those are big numbers. We hope to see 1,000 Israeli businesses in the UAE by the end of the year, and Israel's just announced in March that they hope to see 100,000 visitors from the UAE annually to their country. What does that mean in a people-to-people sense? It means that when Israelis, but also Jewish people from around the world come to the UAE, they will find a home there. They will identify with the religious practices, they will find synagogues, they will find kosher catering, they will find mikvahs, and they will find a tolerance and coexistence in that country that we hope can be replicated across the region. It is a message of hope and tolerance for that region. And I think in all the fields that you mentioned, we are accelerating our cooperation in green energy, technology, IT, learning of languages, and ultimately the Abraham Accords is not just a peace agreement between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. I think it's also a step change in the relationship globally between Islam and the Jewish faith, and that's really important. Yeah. That's my 3 minutes, I think.
Excellent. You know how to do that. Ambassador Hilal, I wonder if I could ask you.
The same question.
Yes, same question.
First of all,
benefits and reaction in your country.
Let me first of all say how much I'm very happy to be here and to meet friends and colleagues and the Jewish community of AJC. Concerning your question, I would say that there was continuum There was not a big change. Why continue? Because Jewish people have been in Morocco since 3,000 years. We have been living together, Muslims and Jewish, as Moroccans, not as different communities. So, and they still remain. Continuity also because the trend of exchange of visits between the Israelis originally from Morocco used to come all the time for religious events or for weddings or for investing. This trend have been also all the time. What changed was just we have more official contact and more official exchange of visits of ministers. And I'm very glad that since the signature of the trilateral declaration, we had more than 5 ministers visiting Morocco. We signed 10 agreements, and these 10 agreements and memorandum of understanding are tackling all kinds of the issues, new technology, intelligence, defense, agriculture, education, sport, trade, tourism. We have now more and more airlines. We have Moroccan Airlines going to Morocco, to Israel, and also El Al. And as everybody knows, we have the second community in Israel, Moroccans. It's 900,000 people living in Israel. So this trend have been all the time there, and that's why I'm saying that there is not real change, but just continuum with the new momentum, with new engagements, and with new expectations and hopes.
By the way, I have to point out that the first time that AJC met with His Majesty King Mohammed VI, just after he became the king of Morocco, he talked to us about his 600,000 subjects in Israel. So I very much identify with what you're saying. The history of the relationship goes back centuries.
May I say something on this? In the 60s, a visitor came to Morocco and told him, there is some Jewish who are living to Israel. We have to do whatever we can to keep them here. And his answer was very clear and spontaneous. He said, no, let them to go. I will have them as ambassadors of Morocco all around the world. And that's what happened, because we have Moroccan Jewish all around the world. They love Morocco. They are still keeping their links with the culture, with the civilization. They are defending Morocco, and we are very grateful to them, because we know that whenever we need them, they are there to help. And also we are very happy to help them because they enrich our present as they enrich our past.
Thank you, Ambassador. Ambassador Al-Rawai, there is a Jewish community in Bahrain as well. It's small and goes back 150 years or so. But talk about the benefits of normalization and the reaction of your people.
First of all, Jason, thank you so much for your invitation, and also I want to thank the entire team of the American Jewish Committee for organizing this important forum. I'm delighted to be with all my colleagues. Let me start by saying that the signing of the Abraham Accord, or the Declaration in Support of Peace between Bahrain and Israel, reflects Bahrain's approach under the leadership of His Majesty King Hamad bin Isa Alkhalifa of openness and communication with the countries to achieve prosperity for all peoples. This approach is not new to us in Bahrain. Even before the signing of the declaration, there were interaction and meetings that took place, most notably the Peace to Prosperity workshop that was held in Bahrain, which is a great and important step to communicate with the Jewish, with the Israeli people direct. We have always been committed to promoting the values of dialogue, tolerance, and understanding. And it has been our experience for centuries having multiple religious communities living peacefully side by side. And we will continue and advance this history of religious diversity and harmony.
Thank you, Ambassador. Ambassador Ardan, benefits to Israel, benefits to the region, reaction of the people of Israel.
Yeah. So first, Jason, thank you for having me, and I'm really happy to be here on this stage with my dear colleagues. I want to wish Jamal a speedy recovery on behalf of all of us. And let me tell you that I know how many efforts were done by the AJC team all around the world to push these normalizations, accords. So I'm truly grateful on behalf of the State of Israel to AJC, and you all deserve one round of applause to yourself. So,
thank you.
And of course, I want to mention my dear friend David Harris for his service, and as we used to call him, since Shimon Peres used to call him, the Foreign Affairs Minister of the Jewish people all around the world. Thank you, David. So let me really describe briefly, because my peers, they mentioned most of the important things. I think that we felt a huge change compared to the peace agreements we had in the past. Of course, the peace agreements we had with Jordan and Egypt had historic importance. They were the ones who paved the way and opened the door for peace in our region. But they were, as we called, cold peace, because we had wars, we had hostilities with the UAE, with Morocco, as was mentioned, with Bahrain. We never had wars. We always allowed our people to interact with one another, even when it was under the radar. All our countries, they support a culture of peace, a culture of tolerance. So the approach was a bottom-up approach. And when all the catalysts, there was a convergence of catalysts that led to the signing of these accords, so immediately there was an explosion of people-to-people interactions. Obviously, our government tried and helped with facilitating and building the infrastructure by opening embassies, visits, signing visa waiver programs. Israelis can enter the UAE now without a visa, but they cannot enter the United States of America without a visa. Yeah, do something about it. By the way, you hear? And
yes.
And we inaugurated direct airlines. So immediately you could see the interactions. At the height of the pandemic, hundreds of thousands of Israelis visited Morocco, UAE, Bahrain. The trade agreement that was signed. So we're very optimistic, but it wasn't really essential. I mean, the people were there; they were prepared. We, as government, we needed not to interrupt them, to get to know each other, and that's why I'm so optimistic, because this psychological shift, this mutual acceptance, in addition to the new economic prospects, and we don't need to elaborate, we see it everywhere, exploring together the space, signing universities that are signing programs together, Israeli farmers growing avocado in the Atlas mountains, everything, every day new exciting stories. So now this combination of psychological shift and economic prospects, I'm sure, is going to lead this combination to make this peace more resilient. And also, when the fruits of this peace will be exposed to the Muslim world, I'm sure many more countries will follow suit, and that's why I'm so optimistic.
Excellent. Ambassador, My next question, and I'll start with you, Ambassador Erdogan. As it has in the past...
But it wasn't brief, as you...
Well, you know, we're trying. Let's try the next time. As it has in the past, the United States played a key role, of course, in advancing normalization.
Yeah.
What role do you expect, and what role do you need the United States to play to expand the circle of Arab-Israeli peace and assure that the current relationships, as you're just saying, generate the kind of success stories that will lead to this widening of the circle of peace?
Yeah, so I was there. I was Israel's ambassador
Yes.
to the United States, and I was privileged to be on the South Lawn at the White House when the signing of the Abraham Accords took place. And you could feel the change in the air, but it was quite clear that, again, I mentioned the convergence of few catalysts, but more than anything else, the fact that we had a many more very committed administration that conveyed a clear message. The road to Washington passes through Jerusalem. If you want to improve your relations with the American administration, it's better for you to improve your relations with Israel as well. And they were willing to incentivize all parties, also including the Israeli government. So it had an enormous contribution to achieving these accords, and I was truly encouraged to see that even though these accords were signed during President Trump's tenure, President Biden immediately embraced them. We established a joint team, the State Department and with my embassy, in order to try to identify new potential countries that might normalize relations and move forward with Israel. And that's what we need also now. I mean, I'm again encouraged to see that there's a bipartisan support for the accord. By the way, I congratulate your new CEO, Theo Deutsch, and he had an enormous contribution to making sure these accords enjoy bipartisan support. We even participated in a few events in Washington to deepen the implementation of the accords, and now I see the new Defend Act moving forward, encouraging all of us to work together to build this regional missile defense systems. And now, maybe to conclude with congratulating President Biden for his upcoming trip to Israel and praying and wishing that his stop in Saudi Arabia would help to expand the new circle of peace, because for sure, if Saudi Arabia joins the accords with its unique status of the protector of the holiest sites in Islam, that is going to, it's sure going to cause a domino effect on our region.
Thank you, Ambassador.
I hope they will join. Thank you.
Well, you may have seen just before we began the plenary session, or just at the beginning of it, Secretary Blinken in the address to AJC talked about the Abraham Accords and the very full endorsement from this administration. Ambassador Al-Rawai, I wonder if I could ask you to jump in on this, on the role that Bahrain expects and wants the United States to continue to play to expand the circle of peace and create success stories out of the peace accords.
Jason, reflecting to this question, in Bahrain we are committed to effort to establish regional and international security and stability in cooperation with our allies and international partners. And the United States, as a strategic partner, is at the forefront. The United States, as it always has, plays an important role in maintaining security and stability in the region. So its efforts are a key in regard as we work collectively, as we build on historic Abraham Accord to spread peace, coexistence, and prosperity throughout the region. So in this, I believe it's important that the United States and the international community continue to support us as they have done so in the past, and they encourage others to see the benefits of what we are doing right now.
Thank you, Ambassador. Ambassador Nusseibeh, continued U.S. role. What are you expecting? What are you hoping for?
So I think I'd like to inject some ambition into the conversation at this point, building on the excitement of everything that has been generated with the initial agreements. The success of these accords depends very much on the work that we put in today and for the coming years. And so it's important to have that sense of ambition for the hope and for the peace circle widening by being pragmatic and practical in selling the peace dividend to a wider circle. We have 2 or 3 views on how that needs to be done, and the primary one is continued U.S. engagement. The United States is the preferred partner for this region. It is a long-standing partner, and we're grateful that Secretary Blinken attended the Negev Summit, for example, and has continued to follow up in this administration full support for the Abraham Accords. There are now several working groups in a number of sectors that are following up concrete, practical impacts and benefits for the region. And that leads me to my second point. The peace dividend is sold if the tangible, practical benefits that we see in the UAE, that we see in Morocco, that we see in Bahrain, and that we see in Israel are felt by a wider circle of Arab and Muslim countries. And these include countries you have peace agreements with, like Jordan and Israel, but there's more work that can be done there. For example, the Clean Energy for Water project that we're working on trilaterally is a very exciting collaboration of bringing capacity electricity to Israel, clean water to Jordan, and facilitated by the UAE's renewable energy industry. So that's one exciting project. The other is, of course, other Arabs in the region, the Egyptians, the Palestinians. These all must be much more of the conversation going forward in order to see the tangible benefits of this peace and share the benefit of that peace dividend. So in the initial signing of the Abraham Accords, of course, as you know, annexation, settlements, these were very much part of the conversation because we genuinely believe that the region can only truly live in peace when we've settled all of these historic conflicts. And that's a belief in the UAE, and we'll do our best to work towards that in whatever way we can. And the third thing is youth in the region and the economic impact for youth in the region. We have to focus on this group. And all of our youth share a similar aspiration. They all want to grow up in a peaceful region where their identities, their religious identities, their ethnic identities are accepted wherever they travel. And why shouldn't that be the case? So impacting this demographic, 60% of the wider region, this youth demographic, is going to be the #1 challenge for governments across the region today. There was I'll leave you with the figures of a RAND study just last year that showed that if we widen the circle of peace, we could add another $1 trillion into the regional economy over the next decade. We could create hundreds of thousands of new jobs for these aspiring youth, and we would take them away from the sadly appealing path of extremism and terrorism if we offered that opportunity. So for me, that is a #1 priority, and that is a #1 priority for my country.
Thank you. Ambassador Hilal, what are you expecting from the United States? What have you got from the United States? What are you hoping for?
Being the last to answer, it's very difficult to find something else to say. But let me just add that we believe that, first of all, that this trilateral agreement or Abraham agreement is not an end in itself. We believe that it's a trigger for better Middle East. And it should not remain Morocco, Israel, United Arab Emirates, Israel, Bahrain. And it should have another dimension to be more global and to have a global vision about peace, about security, about development, about transfer of technology, about investing all together. Why I'm saying this? Because any peace agreement, if it doesn't have its impact on the people, it will not be ownership by the population. And our people believe in peace. They believe in coexistence. They believe in cooperation with Israel. And there is a real enthusiasm toward making trip to Israel, discovering and receiving also Israelis. We had this tradition of receiving Jewish people without any problem, but going to Israel is something else, and we are very happy that it's done. But beside the tourism, we need something else, a real economic dimension to build something else. and to give hopes to the young people. You know that the demography is a problem in our region, but education also. Offering possibility for people going to study in the region that have signed this agreement. And as I said, it should not be, also it should not remain as bilateral agreements just to say we have nothing with Israel. No, we have a lot to build with Israel, but also with Emirates, with Bahrain, with United States. And we need more a proactive role of United States to enlarge, as it has been said, the agreement to other Arab countries. And it's very possible because expectations and all the studies that have been done up to now are giving very positive signals about the engagement and commitment or the hopes of these people joining the Abraham Agreement, and also facing together our challenges of security, of terrorism, violent extremism, countries who are supporting or destabilizing our region. It should not be, for example, country in the Middle East, like example, Emirates or Bahrain. We are facing another country alone. They should be a common spirit to work together, thanks to this Abraham Agreement, to face all together these challenges, because that's the only way to really concrete that and to eliminate all kind of threats and I mean risk for the security of the
So let me pick up on that. We have only a couple of minutes left. I really do want to ask each of you in just 30 seconds really to very quickly highlight the challenges that you see facing this prospect of advancing Arab-Israeli peace. What are the biggest challenges that you are identifying and need to work on together? Quickly, starting with you, Ambassador.
The peace process in the Middle East between the Israelis and the Palestinians and the Arab world, I think if the negotiations restart or resume, that will give another hopes, and it will close the door to extremists, because the main danger is the extremists who are happy that there is nothing moving again. And the people in the region, Israelis and Palestinians, should speak together. Americans can do a lot. And also people who are within this Abraham agreement, they can also push, they can give confidence, they can bring their support to all kinds of discussions.
Thank you, Ambassador. Ambassador Nusseibeh, biggest challenges?
Two quick points. Geopolitical tensions globally. The superpowers are engaged in other matters. And what I think that provides is both challenge but also opportunity. I think our region needs to collectively burden share, work more closely together on our shared strategic objectives, and put forward that vision, asking our partners for what we need when we need it, rather than an over-reliance on them to dictate the strategy. That would be the first challenge. The second challenge is misinformation, disinformation, and the warp speed of social media, which is clouding political judgment. People are making decisions very quickly based on wrong information. And I see that as a huge challenge in the time coming up. It's why we're working so hard on the education agenda, but also on the coexistence agenda. The Abraham Family House in Abu Dhabi, which will have a synagogue, a church, and a mosque in the same place, is part of that, countering the misinformation and disinformation about all of our faiths. I'd like to see anti-Semitism in our region fought with equal passion against as Islamophobia, and together and collectively, because these are both scourges that we face collectively as people. So we need to keep in mind that we have to keep our facts and our information clear and clear-sighted and be clear-eyed about those challenges. And while geopolitical tensions are occupying our friends and our partners, we have to step forward in the region and try and lead the direction and the strategy of our peoples.
Thank you. Ambassador El-Rouei, if I could just ask you to comment, the challenges that Bahrain faces?
I think, Jason, the religious harmony and coexistence that has characterized the Middle East for hundreds of years is under serious threat with the rise of terrorism or extreme group that are aided sometimes by state and other times by political instability. So I think with these two things or two threats or challenges, it's important to enhance our collective effort to face the regional challenges and a threat and maintain, stability and security and enhancing and strengthening regional and international peace.
Thank you, Ambassador. Ambassador Erdogan, last word.
Yeah, I want to build on my colleagues' answers, but try to expand it. It's true that radicals, they do pose a threat against the future of these accords, but you also asked a question about how to expand the accords. And we have to ask ourselves why these radicalization processes are taking place. And the answer is quite clear: Iran. Since Iran signed the deal back in 2014, and it got the dividends from the sanctions relief, they invested most of the money to strengthen their terrorist proxies in our region, namely Hezbollah, Hamas, but also the Houthis in Yemen, and they threaten many of us. And that is why the Middle East today is divided to two clear camps. There's the moderate camp, I think, being represented here on this stage, that believe in coexistence, believes in tolerance. And there's another camp, the Iranian camp, with its terrorist armies. They're bigger than terrorist organization, that is committed to exporting the Shiite revolution. They want to impose their radical Shiite hegemony on our region, and that is even before I start discussing the nuclearization of Iran. But just imagine if we at the UN, we hear so much of how it is dangerous where a country like Russia, they have nuclear capabilities. So just imagine a radical Ayatollah regime. They are merely weeks from acquiring their first nuclear bomb, and the international community doesn't do almost anything. This week, the IAEA condemned Iran. Instead of taking the case of Iran immediately to the Security Council, holding them accountable, triggering with the signatories of the JCPOA, triggering the snapback mechanism, imposing crippling sanctions together with a credible military threat against the Ayatollah, forcing them, like President Roosevelt used to say, speak softly but carry a big stick, forcing them to decide between their nuclear ambitions and their survival as a regime. We continue to hear only talks and talks. So if you ask me what's the biggest challenge, this is the biggest challenge, and I hope now the international community would wake up, and we will see quite soon the Security Council discussions, not only discussing everything that is happening in Israel, but the real thing that are really threatening the future of the entire world. Thank you.
This is obviously a conversation that could go on for 2 or 3 more hours, but unfortunately we are way out of time. But thank you so much, ambassadors, for taking part in this, for always being accessible to AJC. We'll see you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.